All right. Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, everyone, depending on wherever in the world you're joining us from. I'm broadcasting live from Twitter headquarters. It's David Sachs here. Elon is
Even before the halting, glitchy, and frankly weird launch of Ron DeSantis' presidential campaign on Twitter, it was clear that Linda Yaccarino was taking a tough job. Twitter CEO is not a normal CEO gig, especially when you're Elon Musk's pick to run the company.
The consensus was that whoever took that role was going to have quite an uphill climb.
That's Vittoria Elliot, who covers platforms and power for Wired.
Both because of the position that Twitter is in right now, and also because of the visibility that Elon has, and the fact that even for companies where he's not necessarily running day-to-day operations like SpaceX, he's still kind of considered the face of that brand.
Yaccarino has to thread a delicate needle, keeping Musk happy while winning back skeptical advertisers. She has a deep background in ads and partnerships. That's what she was in charge of at NBC Universal.
They need someone with that expertise, especially because they have lost so much advertising revenue in the 6 months-ish that Musk has been in charge. So I think qualification-wise, she's a very smart and natural pick, of course.
But there's something else, something Vittoria wrote a story about, something that fits a pattern in corporate America.
It is, I think, not lost on people, specifically like academics and experts who study these patterns, that in this moment where the company is doing much worse than it's done historically, that it is a woman who's being tapped to lead. And that doesn't, again, mean anything about her not being qualified. If anything, oftentimes the women who take these roles are eminently qualified. More than anything, it reflects on the idea that it is not until a moment of great crisis and therefore a need for great change that companies will often choose that moment to appoint someone who is a person of color or a woman or both.
Today on the show, how Linda Yaccarino is standing on the edge of what's known as the glass cliff. I'm Lizzie O'Leary, and you're listening to What Next TBD, a show about technology, power, and how the future will be determined. Stick around. At the end of your first year, Discover credit cards automatically double all the cash back you've earned. That's right. Everything you earned doubled. All the cash back from eating at your favorite soup dumpling restaurant doubled. All the cash back from that trip where you sort of learned to snowboard also doubled. And the best part, you don't have to do anything ridiculous to get it. Nope, Discover does it automatically. Seriously though, see terms and check it out for yourself at discover.com/match.
Quentin here runs a sustainable clothing brand.
Hi there.
He's excited that his shipping company, FedEx, has set a goal of having carbon-neutral operations by 2040.
Impressive.
When an influencer tweeted about his recycled bamboo t-shirts, Quentin unexpectedly became quite popular.
I'll take it.
He uses FedEx to reach new customers around the globe, while making Earth a priority. FedEx, where now meets next.
It's important to understand that Twitter, at least back when Twitter was a public company and we could look at its financial statements, made almost all of its money from advertising. And Elon Musk's terminally online antics have really threatened that.
Right now, Twitter's primary crisis is that it lost a lot of advertisers when Musk took over, partly because he was very clear about wanting to offer amnesty to users who had been banned in the past, some of them with neo-Nazi politics or incredibly hateful histories of speech. He wanted to offer amnesty. He, has made himself very much a free speech absolutist, although that is sort of mostly in the American context because Twitter has been taking down more content abroad than it has in the past by the request of governments. I think it really spooked a lot of advertisers. And there was actually a study that came out just recently that I reported on from some researchers at the University of Southern California, I believe, who basically showed that Twitter did get worse when Musk took over. There was more hate speech. There wasn't a decrease in bots. There was all these problems that everyone sort of said were going to occur. And that spooks advertisers, and that also spooks users. And so it becomes this sort of death spiral.
Advertising, at least before Twitter became a private company, generated 90% of the company's revenue. Linda Yaccarino is, an advertising powerhouse. That is her background. And I guess I wonder how she threads this needle, right? How do you manage to either win back advertisers or court ones who are nervous while also not alienating Elon Musk?
I think her biggest challenge and one of the biggest determinants of her success, at least according to the people that I spoke with, is really going to be how much time, money, and breadth she's really given to make decisions about these things. Because Musk is going to be staying on as CTO, which means he's going to be responsible for product. A lot of the technical stuff is still going to go ostensibly through him. He's also going to be staying as part of the board. So we don't know yet how much breadth she's going to have to roll back some of these decisions or change certain things. But I mean, I will say that if you look at SpaceX, which is another one of Musk's companies where he is CEO, but the COO, which is Gwen Shotwell, runs day-to-day operations, I think it's pretty evident that she has a lot of breadth to make decisions for SpaceX. So, I mean, it's not just because he's staying in an executive leadership position doesn't mean that she's not going to have the time or support she needs. But, we really don't know right now. He's still in a prominent position where he can tweet something publicly, and that can maybe make her job a little bit harder, as I think people at Tesla have figured out and at some of his other companies. So I think there's always that risk. But in terms of the day-to-day operations of the company, I think, at least with SpaceX, we see that he has a lot of trust in the other executives. And, she may have the breadth she needs to make some substantive choices.
Do you think her hiring says that he has figured out that maybe his past conduct and the shedding of advertisers was an oopsie? Is it an acknowledgement that he needed someone to come in and do that side of the business?
I don't know that we can say for sure. I definitely think, if nothing else, it acknowledges a need for that particular form of expertise for the company to be successful. And I think a lot of times companies, the background of the people that they choose as CEO sort of reflects the future that they're possibly envisioning for the company, or the areas of the company that are going to be most vital to it. And so I think, the fact that she has this background, if nothing else, reflects his understanding that advertising is going to continue to be an incredibly important source of revenue, that plays like Twitter Blue and sort of some of the other revenue-generating ideas that he's had probably can't be the substantial foundation for the economic survival of this company.
Tell me about the glass cliff. What exactly is it?
It is a phenomenon that was actually identified almost 20 years ago, so it's quite well known and quite well documented at this point. When companies are in crisis, women or people of color are more likely to be chosen as executive leaders. This is sort of a complex reason why this happens, and part of it is that when companies are in crisis and they need to signal change, we're making big, substantial changes here, there's a very visible change in choosing someone who looks completely different than your previous leader to fill that role.
To be clear, Vittoria says, it's not that the women or people of color stepping up aren't qualified, more that it can take a crisis for a corporate board to even consider them.
I think the other thing is, we have a lot of really successful examples, like Mary Barra, obviously at GM, is historically held up as this incredible leader who took the company out of the financial crash where it was teetering on the edge and made it profitable again. And so while these jobs leading companies in crisis are often way more difficult, that doesn't mean that these people can't be successful, and it doesn't mean that the people who are being chosen for them are not up to the task. A lot of the times they really are. It's just the challenges they face are much higher than the male CEOs who came before them.
Your story had a headline saying Linda Yaccarino was teetering on the edge of a glass cliff, and she responded with a tweet. She quote tweeted it and said, "As someone used to wearing 4-inch heels, let's be crystal clear. I don't teeter. Twitter 2.0, hashtag together we rise." What do you think of that? Like, what does that kind of response tell you?
Well, it tells me that headline was very good clickbait. I think it would be foolish for someone in her position to do anything but express confidence in the things she's doing. And if anything, the fact that they're both willing to do this and if she can turn Twitter around, it shows nothing but her excellence and her capacity and her bravery to do a very difficult thing.
When we come back, a not quite glorious history of Silicon Valley sending a woman to the plate to bat cleanup. It's time to reboot your credit card with Apple Card. Now, when you get a new Apple Card by May 31st, you can earn $75 back at Nike. Just spend $75 or more on qualifying purchases at Nike using Apple Card with Apple Pay within your first 30 days. Apple Card gives you unlimited daily cash back that you can automatically grow at 4.15% annual percentage yield when you open a high-yield savings account. Learn more about Apple Card in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card subject to credit approval. Savings provided by Goldman Sachs Bank USA. Member FDIC and available to Apple Card owners subject to eligibility requirements. $75 daily cash valid only for new Apple Card accounts opened by May 31st, 2023. Qualifying purchases at Nike only within the U.S. Additional terms and limitations apply. Visit apple.co/Nike promo for important offer details.
The hearing will come to order. Good morning, Judge. Welcome to the Blinding Lights.
Coming soon from Slate Podcast.
Members of this committee have asked, who is the real Clarence Thomas?
What is the real Clarence Thomas?
Which is the real Clarence Thomas?
Justice Thomas was a radical.
He's this almost like Shakespearean figure.
He was closely aligned with Malcolm X and the most liberal of ideology.
And that is a puzzle.
I don't know that I would call myself an enigma. I'm just Clarence Thomas.
I'm Joel Anderson, and on this season of Slow Burn, we'll explore how a black man from rural Georgia went from being a college radical to a conservative icon.
If having an experience in predominantly white spaces, particularly a traumatic experience, can radicalize you to the left, then it certainly can radicalize you to the right.
You'll hear from his closest family and friends, including his political mentor.
We had the lights turned way down low, and he said to me, "Jack, do you know what this is? It's a high-tech lynching."
And you'll hear from women who knew Thomas long before he was on the Supreme Court.
He would say, "I'm their guy." I don't think he ever realized that he was being manipulated. I don't think he realizes it now.
We'll look at where Thomas came from, his rise to power, and how he's brought the rest of us along with him, whether we like it or not.
So look, when I talk about Clarence Thomas, there are going to be two groups of listeners, and neither one are going to like what I say. So my question to you is, why am I doing this interview?
Slow Burn Season 8, Becoming Justice Thomas, is out Wednesday, May 31st, wherever you listen. Did you ever forgive Joe Biden for that?
Yeah, I had to forgive him. I never forget, no.
I'm Dahlia Lithwick, host of Amicus, Slate's podcast about the courts and the law.
Trump's entire defense was based not only on E. Jean being a liar, but pretty much on every other person who testified in that courtroom also being a liar.
This week, history-making lawyer Robbie Kaplan and the only woman ever to hold Donald J. Trump to account in a court of law, E. Jean Carroll, join me on the show.
I didn't think there would be a grade above what I was experiencing with Robbie as we gripped hands in the courtroom.
We go deep on their groundbreaking case, their victory, how it all came together, how they plan to respond to the former president's evident desire to keep paying defamation damages forever into the future.
Robbie has figured it out.
Oh, good.
Robbie has figured
That's
it
nice
out.
to know. Tell me what I figured out.
You figured out legal recourse to Donald Trump's lies.
Amicus with me, Dahlia Lithwick, every Saturday through June. That's AMICUS. Find us wherever you listen to your podcasts.
The term glass cliff was first coined by Michelle Ryan and Alexander Haslam at the University of Exeter in the UK in 2005. Subsequent research looking at Fortune 500 companies found that over a 15-year period, women and people of color were much more likely to be appointed CEO when a company is in crisis. Two notable Silicon Valley examples are Ellen Pao, who was tapped to run Reddit, and Marissa Mayer at Yahoo.
Marissa Mayer she was quite young when she was appointed as CEO of Yahoo. She was 37. She was sort of a Google wonderkind, and she was incredibly talented. But she was appointed in 2012, and that was sort of like peak Facebook and Google dominance. You had two companies that were just eating for Google, the search and email and sort of everything market, and Google and Facebook were eating the ad market. You know, it was a very tough position for her to come into. And there are definitely mistakes that she's been criticized for in her leadership, and no one's going to be perfect. But the reality is that she came into the company at quite a tough time when the market forces were not really in the company's favor. And she brokered a deal to sell Yahoo to Verizon. And again, you could be critical of that, but the reality is she managed to at least land the plane. You know, she found an exit. Similarly, Ellen Pao was CEO at Reddit. She tried very hard to deal with the company's hate speech and harassment in some of its more aggressive subreddits. And ultimately, users didn't like that. And she faced a lot of harassment, and she exited pretty quickly. And for her, you know, that issue of hateful content being sort of rampant on the platform, that predated her. But she was the one who was choosing to deal with it. You know, no leader is perfect. Everyone's going to fuck up. Nobody's going to make all the right calls. It's just not possible. But research shows that women leaders are going to be under more scrutiny for making wrong calls, and they're going to have less forgiveness.
Do you think that is particularly stark in Silicon Valley, where you have a bro-y culture, a lot of, you know, venture capital firms led by men, and I think, frankly, a environment that can be hostile to women?
You know, I obviously Silicon Valley does have its bro culture, but I think when you're talking about executive leadership generally, that's a very male-dominated space.
Yeah.
I think there was like a Bloomberg piece recently that said that, like, for the first time, the number of women CEOs has outstripped the number of CEOs named John. Like, you know, it's not like every other industry is some paragon of gender equity. And it's not like the space of executive leadership is particularly well-balanced gender-wise. So obviously Silicon Valley has its reputation, and there is a reason for that. Yeah. But I think when we're talking about the upper echelons of any company, this is a pattern we see across the board.
Linda Yaccarino is also in this very specific position where she is coming in, taking control of Twitter, but at the same time, what Elon Musk has been doing over the last 6 months or so has created a very staunch group of supporters who were very happy with what he was doing. This particular kind of army of his, and her embrace of like kind of standard corporate DEI initiatives at NBC, or frankly, somewhat banal, like yay, women's empowerment tweeting, have meant that she's been received by his guys, by his like very online group of people with a big thud. It seems like a particular issue with this job, because it's not just Elon. It's not just Twitter's employees. There's also the online world and how they receive her coming in. I wonder if you think about how that complicates her job.
I think users of any social platform are often really critical of that platform if they feel like it's not doing exactly what they want it to do at all times. And that would be true for anyone taking over this role. Musk has obviously cultivated a really big sort of cult of personality, particularly on the platform. But, there are many people who see this as okay, good. He's bringing in this person who's, seems very qualified. And because they have loyalty to Musk, and this is a decision that, he and his team have made, and, it's ultimately still his platform that he owns, they support it.
So the fact that Cat Turd 2 is tweeting Twitter 2.0 was fun while it lasted, get ready for it to suck again. We just figure Cat Turd's followers are actually going to be more loyal to Elon.
I don't think there's a way that anybody in this role could keep everyone happy,
Fair.
Because the reality is, for as many people, for the small faction of Twitter that really liked this version of the platform, there are large sections of users who do not, and who have either left or reduced the level to which they use the platform. I think we're also seeing this moment where part of the reason that people haven't necessarily felt like they could leave is because there's not really anywhere else to go. Twitter is such a public-facing platform. It felt very much like the place to go for the news and for the voices of important people, sort of in reaction to real-time events in many ways. And there hasn't really been something like that felt like it could replace it. But now we're seeing Blue Sky, we're seeing T2, Mastodon obviously had its moment. So, we're also maybe entering a world where there might eventually be some form of competition for this particular type of platform. I think the other thing to really think about is the people right now who are paying for blue checks, they're not accounting for very much money. And part of what made Twitter popular in the first place was the fact that they sort of pioneered the sort of traditional system of verification that, they would verify celebrities and artists and stuff like that. And so that meant that you couldn't necessarily have these accounts pretending to be someone that they weren't if they were a famous person. And that meant that you had celebrities like Taylor Swift or Justin Bieber or whoever using the platform and bringing their followers there. And so stripping away that sort of thing really gives another platform the possible opportunity to fill that void. And so I think, as much as maybe people might gripe with decisions either which way, whoever is CEO of Twitter was going to have to make some calls that are ultimately best for the survival of the platform. And I think many of these people would probably prefer to continue to have Twitter to complain about Twitter on than to not have it at all.
How much runway does she have? Because, Twitter's not a public company. She doesn't have to immediately assuage shareholder concerns. How long do you think she's got to show that she can take this company onto more solid financial footing?
We don't know. What I can say is that some of the professors that I spoke to sort of ballparked when a woman takes over in leadership, roles like this one, that, maybe you get 2-3 years, but we don't know. And the reality is that whatever the amount of time is, often for women, it's shorter than what men would get in that same situation. But again, hopefully she and Musk are aligned with what they perceive as the priorities. And I think, we really can't say. But, it doesn't happen overnight. And I think sometimes as impulsive as Musk can sometimes appear in his decision-making, he is probably a wise enough businessman to know that will take time.
Vittoria Elliot, thank you very much for talking with me.
Thank you so much.
Vittoria Elliot is a reporter for Wired, covering platforms and power. And that is it for our show today. What Next TBD is produced by Patrick Fort. Our show is edited by Jonathan Fisher. Alicia Montgomery is vice president of audio for Slate. TBD is part of the larger What Next family. And we're also part of Future Tense, a partnership of Slate, Arizona State University, and New America. And if you are a fan of the show, I have a request for you. Join Slate Plus. Just head on over to slate.com/whatnextplus to sign up. You will get all your Slate podcasts ad-free. All right, we'll be back on Sunday with another episode. I'm Lizzie O'Leary. Thanks for listening.